This is Inside the Commission, a Gambling Commission podcast. Welcome to Inside the Commission, a podcast all about gambling in Great Britain. Here we'll cover all the latest topics and trends from across the gambling sector and discuss the big issues that matter to you. From consumer queries to industry insights, we'll bring you the facts from the front line of regulation and share the stats and stories from those in the know. For all the latest discussions and updates, you can subscribe to our Gambling Commission YouTube channel, or you can find us on your preferred platform, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hello and welcome to Inside the Commission. Today I'm joined by members of the Market Insight team to talk about the work that they do for the Commission. It's probably an area of the Commission that doesn't get as much attention as maybe other areas do, but a very important part of how we sort of operate at the Gambling Commission. So hopefully today we'll get an opportunity to really hear from the team about the work that they do and how it supports the wider organisation. So before we get into the questions and learn a bit more about the work they do, let's introduce our guests. So we start with yourself, Jennifer.
Yep, hello. I'm Jenny. I'm a senior manager in the Market Insight team. I've been with the Commission about 8 years. And before this role, I was in the research and stats team looking at the gambling survey for Great Britain. And prior to coming to the Commission, I've had a series of different sort of data analytics research roles across different sectors. So that's kind of my background.
Hi, my name's Alex. I've been part of the Market Insight team for close to 8 years now. Prior to joining the Commission, I worked on the other side of the fence. I was on the trading floor at a large GB operator for nearly a decade.
That must have been exciting. What made you want to come to the GC?
Good question. So, primarily personal reasons, in that we started a young family and the trading floor hours. I was a tennis specialist, meant that working night shifts and long weekends were no longer sustainable.
Yeah, but it's brilliant that you bring that experience from the industry to the GC. I think that's very important. Okay, well, let's get into the Market Insights team then. Obviously, it's an area that gets people all excited. Everyone wants to know that crystal ball and what's going to happen in the future. And of course, you guys have got your eyes on as much of that as possible. So give the sort of listeners a bit of an idea about what you do and the work you do and how it helps the Commission.
Yeah, so I'll probably just introduce the team. So we are a small team of 5 at the Commission. And we're made up of people who bring different experiences to the team. We've got people like Alex who have joined us from industry. We've got people with more of a commercial background, and then people who have sort of insight-focused experiences as well. And as a team, we monitor market trends. We look at development across different jurisdictions, and we want to understand the impact that these trends could have on our regulatory approach. So that's kind of, a brief summary of the team.
And how do you guys make sure that you sort of stay independent and objective with the work that you guys do?
Yeah, so we take a really wide view of the sources that we look at. So some would be internal sources, some would be external sources. And also looking across sort of different sectors as well. So we want to make sure we've got the fullest picture that we can possibly have. So we might consult things such as media updates, operator data, webinars, conferences, and obviously things within the Commission, talking to different teams as well. And I think it's important to just say that when we're looking at stuff, nothing is set in stone. In our approach, everything that we kind of come across, we will have a look into. There's sort of nothing that we kind of wouldn't delve into if we thought it was necessary.
Yeah, and Alex, yourself, in your opinion, in terms of the Market Insight team, and you've been here for a while, has it changed much? Has the focus always stayed on what's up and coming?
Yes, obviously the kind of our role has always been to kind of look to the future, as in what trends and what products or stuff may impact the gambling industry. But obviously our approach to how we kind of identify trends and practices continues to evolve. So we do a lot more operator engagement, for example, now than maybe historically when I first joined the Commission. So going out and actually talking to the industry is obviously one of the better sources to find out what is going on.
Yeah, so you hear it from the horse's mouth, I suppose. Yeah, absolutely correct. So if we think about the Commission then, obviously it needs market insight to be able to do its job in a way. It's quite an important part of what you guys do. So did you want to sort of share about how the market insight team helps the Commission fulfil its role?
Yeah, sure. So like you say, we are primarily an internally focused team. We're here to kind of inform the board, senior leaders and other colleagues as well on the trends that we are seeing in our work. We would sort of look at a trend that kind of comes to our attention, delve into it, understand it, think about, try and assess that impact that it could have, look at the risks and opportunities, and then share that with the groups of people that I mentioned previously. So that's what we would do, and I think by doing that and taking that approach, it allows us to be proactive as a regulator, and it makes sure that when we're developing policies, they are proportionate to the risk that they pose.
And does that work quite successfully at the Commission then? Is there a process where that happens quite organically now, or is it a case of waiting and seeing what happens and then raising the flag when you need to?
I think we can raise the flag when we need to, but equally we have some sort of quarterly meeting set in stone with different types of people across the organisation to sort of share the findings of our work that we've kind of come across.
And yourself, Alex, because you've been part of that process in terms of looking at what these trends are and how you're sharing that. Are there sort of examples where you're sort of trying to manage expectations as well with certain groups about what impacts could likely happen?
Yeah, so I guess a recent example that we can use is surrounding prediction markets. So these are where consumers can trade event-based contracts on markets including financial, sports and political events. And if you kind of followed this area closely, you'll see that they've grown exponentially in the US with operators such as Kalshi and Polymarket, for example. This is an area that we've obviously been closely monitoring, but as we have published on our website, we've noted that it's a product that obviously subject to specific business models. It would appear that it would fall in our definition of being a betting intermediary under UK legislation. Now, while these are kind of new products in America, in the GB market, betting exchanges have been around since 2020. So it's not necessarily a new thing for us to be overly concerned about, but is obviously one that picked up a lot of media attention about potential impacts in our market. There's a lot of legal kind of debate about this in the US at the moment, so we are going to continue to monitor this and with interest.
So that's like a typical trend or a typical thing that's happening in the industry, in the market, not just in the UK but the wider sort of global economy. You sort of pick up on it and you try and address those issues and raise it at the right points within the business, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly that. So a large part of what we do is looking at other jurisdictions to see what's happening over there and what may be brought into the GB market. And similarly, it's not just within a gambling sphere, it's also looking at other areas of retail, for example, and seeing how can some of that technology or stuff that's breaking through there, how can that cross over potentially into gambling.
Yeah. Brilliant. If we think about then thinking about horizon scanning, I suppose it's a bit of a sort of strange term that's been around for a while, and what do you think of what are you talking about when you're talking about horizon scanning? So how does it actually work in practice, and what does it actually mean, and what are you doing when you're horizon scanning?
So I suppose it's a way that people can kind of stay ahead of the curve, by spotting these sort of up and coming trends, and not just kind of, you know, letting them play out and then, you know, finding your feet in that sort of situation. Some of them that we come across are quite sort of specific to a particular industry or sector, but actually there are some sort of more general trends, so economic factors, social trends, legislation, and actually they have, you know, the potential to have a much more sort of wide-reaching impact beyond gambling as well. So for each trend we'll have a look at the impact that it may have on consumers, the wider public, the gambling industry, and then of course we need to consider, you know, how that affects or could affect the Commission and the industry as well. So it's about thinking about those different audiences and sort of the risks and opportunities that a trend could pose, which is explored through the horizon scanning process.
You mentioned, you know, you talk to the industry a lot more than you did in the past. What other sort of avenues do you have to try and build your picture about where this information is coming from, or what trend might be developing? So are you obviously talking to the industry, but there might be other information coming in from other places that could feed into it?
Yes, so we use a wide variety of sources to kind of gain a bigger picture of what's going on. So these might be just scanning media, so various different websites, gambling related websites for example. We go to investor events, looking at operator updates and data, as well as talking to other kind of industry analysts as well. Attend various different webinars and conferences that you may have seen.
Trying to keep your finger on the pulse in many different places.
Yeah, definitely. And then another big part is making sure that we're closely tied in with various different parts within the Commission internally. So, for example, with our licensing colleagues, they will be getting business plans. They may see some novel products or some interesting new developments coming through, so it's about kind of them sharing it with us, and then we also say we've seen this, you might be seeing this come your way as well in the future.
And I think we've got connections as well to like the different regulators as well, and like the ASA for advertising standards too. So it's a whole raft of things that we kind of try and
different information sources or whatever, then you try and distill that into something that you can sort of put into it.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So I suppose if we get onto the bit where we've got to the point where you've identified and you've looked at particular things and you've prioritized some of those trends, what is the process behind that then, in terms of what's likely to be something that has a big impact, what's likely to be something that just sort of washes over us so it doesn't have as much, or what is something we need to have a watching brief on, like prediction markets?
So we gather all the information that we collected, we analyse it for kind of various patterns and trends, and then as a team we'll get together, we'll perform various different analysis. So these are the kind of stuff that most people will be familiar with in terms of like a SWOT analysis, PESTLE analysis, looking at risk assessment. So mainly just analysing what is the likelihood of this trend happening and also the impact. And then once we've kind of as a team come up with kind of a score or a matrix of what may happen, we'll then discuss that with other key stakeholders within the Commission and say, does this look right? Kind of, this is our thinking, is this what you're seeing? And then from that we'll then decide, well, do we want to take or look at this bit of work or this trend further, and also at what scale? Some bits of work will just be, for example, a report for a certain stakeholder within the business. Other bits will be kind of a wider piece of work to share with the whole Commission, to kind of share some potentially important information or products that might be upcoming.
And then obviously there's some trends as well which have been sort of ongoing. So the impact of COVID, it wasn't just kind of something we looked at for a quarter. It was a continued legacy. To sort of see how that played out. So yeah, there's various ways really.
Is that what makes a trend then in terms of like longevity? Is that one of the factors that you look at, or because some things happen quite quickly and it's a small burst, and other things could have a long tail?
I think it can be quite difficult to tell sometimes, and you can't always get it right. It is a judgment exercise, and I think it's about having that knowledge yourself, tapping into other people's knowledge, and sort of making the best assessment of the example you've got in front of you. So just to kind of give you a bit of an example, when we had the pandemic, we did see a short-term moment where we had a growth in online poker. Now, was that like a long-term trend, or was that just something we're seeing because people are at home with their devices in front of them? But actually that was more of a short-term moment. But I suppose the decrease in the number of betting shops and the kind of move to more digital platforms, that's something that we have seen over a sort of a longer period of time. So that's probably something that we're more interested in taking forward.
Okay, that sounds really good. I suppose we're thinking about the trends then. Are there particular trends, Alex, that we could talk about from the past where we've looked at them and gone, okay, now we can sort of look back and go, yeah, we identified a particular thing a few years ago, or whatever it might be. Now we've got a good idea of how it's played out. How do we feel that process went? And the insight was, did it work? Did we use it the right way? Did we get essentially, I suppose it's not about being right or wrong, is it? Because you can never predict how things are going to go. You try to get as much information and present it in the right way. But are there examples where previously we've looked at them and gone, okay, we did a pretty good job on those ones?
It's going to sound very simplistic, but from when I started 10 years ago to now, the move to mobile will be a big kind of boom for just obviously the gambling industry, but the wider kind of UK and the world. The gambling industry has obviously, remote gambling has increased quite a lot and still continues to grow quite a lot. So last year we saw 13% growth in GGY for RCBB, which is remote casino, bingo and betting. And since 2015-16 financial year, it's gone up 84%. So this is something we've obviously closely followed for a number of years now. And I remember when I first started, we were looking at things like gamification, for example. So we've seen leading operators move to, or attempt to move to, a more recreational consumer base. So I remember when I started, there was a lot of focus during operator results around, we want a more recreational consumer base rather than a reliance on a one or two high value customers, for example. So part of this is we've seen measures such as free to play games. So you might have seen Soccer Saturday, for example, Pick Six scores, and there's obviously been various other kind of methods and ways of trying to encourage recreational consumers to come back every weekend, for example, to log on to your apps or your website. And then also part of the kind of strong remote growth has been within slots or slots-like games and casino. So we've also seen gamification within that sphere. So you'll see it in terms of we've seen a lot more kind of live dealers, for example, game shows. So kind of you're spinning your big wheels and more interaction between operators and consumers. And also stuff like crash games, which more prevalent maybe in Latin and South America or Africa historically, but also now starting to grow in popularity in the Great British market. And it's been really interesting to see kind of the continued growth of slots despite kind of state limit restrictions being brought in recently. It's still a product vertical that continues to grow. but yeah, so that summarises kind of maybe an area we've got right, but there's also some areas where it's been difficult to forecast. So for example, during the pandemic we started doing forecasting, but I don't think any of us at the time realised what was going to happen in terms of the longevity of lockdowns and in and out of restrictions. So that's a difficult time to try and work out how's that going to impact us in terms of commission, in terms of like our fees that we collect, but also on how it's going to impact on consumer behaviour and how that all ties in with our licensing objectives. And we've also looked at some stuff in the past which has kind of maybe failed to take off at all. So examples of this would be the metaverse, for example, kind of Facebook and now Meta's kind of big thing that they invested in. And I remember there was a time when we'd be attending webinars and events, and it'd be how can gambling or how is gambling going to fit into this part of product that is going to potentially everyone's going to be using. But obviously that's kind of seemed to have fizzled out somewhat. And then also a perennial favourite is the growth of esports. So for as long as I've been in the commission, every year this is a year that esports is going to take off. Right. It's still quite a niche product, especially among kind of the leading operators compared to a lot of other areas. So it'll be interesting. I mean, it's something obviously we continue to keep an eye on, but it's maybe not quite crossed over into a recreational consumers kind of thinking at this point of time.
This is Inside the Commission, a Gambling Commission podcast. Alongside Inside the Commission, the podcast you're listening to right now, why not subscribe to our e-bulletin? It's a bi-monthly e-newsletter which contains information about consultations, announcements and important updates about regulation, anti-money laundering and compliance issues. Visit our website gamblingcommission.gov.uk/e-bulletin. This is Inside the Commission, a Gambling Commission podcast.
So I suppose if we then really think ahead then about the next year ahead, next 12 months, especially in the gambling industry, there's obviously quite a bit going on, shall we say, in the industry.
Yeah.
So, we talk about the technology change, you talk about data, you talk about, government and taxation and regulation, all these things in the melting pot. What are the sort of things that you're keeping a close eye on, and what are we expecting to see happen in this sort of space?
Yeah, so I'll start if you like. So I think in terms of sort of regulation tightening, I think we'll continue to see that not just here in Great Britain but across sort of other jurisdictions as well. The rise of sort of other markets as well. So obviously we had the USA and we've got Brazil, but I think we'll kind of continue to see the growth there. So that's something we obviously want to sort of keep our eye on. And then in terms of sort of more sort of an emerging theme, I think is the sort of the theme of convergence. So we've started seeing gambling and sort of other sort of adjacent products coming together. So the crossover between like gambling products and lottery products wasn't typically a joining that we typically saw before, but that is something that we've seen more and more.
Is that because of consumers' demand or what sort of drives that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an element of sort of diversification of risk in an operator profile. So, you think, it's just having, when regulatory tightening happens, it's okay because you've got different markets, different products, and so you're kind of diversifying that risk to some degree. There's probably other elements that kind of play into that as well. Perhaps wanting something all under one roof, or but yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it so far.
Yeah, if I was going to build on what Shani said there with a couple of examples of what we're looking at the moment, The first will be the impact of the upcoming tax changes to the GB market. So obviously this is going to have a large impact potentially on the industry, and we will be kind of closely monitoring that to see what that has, and also on consumer behaviour. So we've already seen in some of the operators' recent financial results potential mitigation efforts that they're starting to bring in. So reductions in marketing, for example. We've seen various different horse races, sponsorships being given up by certain operators. And then we're also cognizant of potential impacts that may be brought in by operators. So this could be in many forms, but for example, a reduction in margins, so the lowering of return to players in slots games, or maybe wider margins, wider overrounds in sports books. We may potentially see a reduction in bonus offers, for example. So yeah, this is an area that we'll obviously continue to monitor. We might see some market contraction as well. So the kind of the long tail of the industry, the smaller players may struggle to absorb some of the additional costs that maybe some of the larger firms have got more levers to pull on to try and alleviate. So I think a couple of the larger firms have already noted that there could be potential for a growth in market share for them, either organically from these dropping out or through some M&A, mergers and acquisitions activity, for example. Another area kind of around this is we look at other jurisdictions. So obviously we're not the first jurisdiction to make tax changes. So we look at other areas such as the Netherlands, for example, who brought in changes to tax rates to see what impact that had as well. And then if I can move on to a second example that we're looking at, would be artificial intelligence. So obviously this is a big thing globally at the moment, and where the market insight team are looking at specifically within the Commission is how operators are using it. So other areas of the Commission will kind of be looking at how we can maybe use the technology ourselves to further our capabilities, but what we're focused on is how operators are using it. So we're doing this for our usual horizon scanning methods, which we discussed earlier, including kind of meeting with operators themselves, but also meeting with companies who are adjacent to the industry, such as maybe sports data providers, which has been a really interesting experience. So, I mean, AI use has been going on at operators for years. It's not new in terms of kind of machine learning to help improve their safer gambling algorithms. But obviously in the last couple of years it's maybe exploded in terms of use for coding or in kind of back-end administrative functions, and also kind of cyber security for protection measures. So it's been quite interesting in that a lot of internal kind of facing kind of changes have been made, but at the moment we're not seeing too much external use of AI in terms of direct interaction with customers. We have seen kind of reports of kind of AI dealers, for example. So obviously live casino is quite a popular vertical, and seeing potential of avatars or whatever taking over that space. So that'd be something we obviously keep a very close eye on. And I guess the other area that maybe not explored so much is consumer use of AI. So obviously with a lot more kind of data available to us on the internet, people are starting to feed this data into AI tools, for example, and use it to get advice for kind of betting strategies, for example. So yeah, a lot of really interesting kind of things happening in this space. So yeah, we take all that and then we'll share that internally with various different stakeholders about, so for example, policy colleagues, and they may look at, you know, what they may need to do in the future based on what we're seeing. Yeah, so that's a couple of examples, I guess, of what we're seeing, but there's a whole There's a whole list of trends and topics that we're looking.
It would be quite long, wouldn't it? I suppose those examples are really strong in terms of the industry and the convergence, and then around taxation and AI. I mean, they run quite deep, don't they? I suppose if we're sort of rounding off then for us today, obviously the industry will be interested to hear sort of what the Commission does in this space, which is great, but what would be the sort of the final message you would sign off with in terms of the wider market insight work? And I mean, you already talked to them about a fair amount of things. I suppose it's about continuing those conversations and sharing as much as they can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is, it's difficult to kind of pinpoint one thing. I think, sometimes we do find ourselves in a difficult environment, and we can't always control what kind of goes on around us in terms of the economy, regulation, and all that kind of, all those kind of things. But I think some of the things Alex talked about, the technology changes that we've seen over the years, the increasing use of AI and what that could hold in the future. I think, like I said, you can't always control what's around you, but I think you kind of need to sort of seize the opportunity, using those technologies to, I suppose, innovate and adapt to kind of stay ahead. Don't get me wrong, I know it's not easy. It is kind of, it is a change to kind of, when you find yourself with certain environmental factors, but I think it's about using the tools that you've got around you and the things that have been sort of developed to enable yourself to sort of stay ahead, really.
Sounds really good. Thank you very much. Okay, I think that brings us to the end, so thank you both for popping along.
Oh, no worries.
Thank you.
This is Inside the Commission, a Gambling Commission podcast. To stay up to date with the latest content, you can subscribe to our Gambling Commission YouTube channel, or you can find us on your preferred platform, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks for listening.